Stanford University, the ultimate dream of many, an elite and prestigious institution educating the brightest minds of our current generation. Not to mention the magnificent botanical campus it holds, with the warmth of the sun shining perfectly on its students as they make their way to their class. But did you know that if you walk into Jordan Hall, the home of the Department of Psychology, and go down into its basements, you'll be able to stand right on the ground where one of the most appalling psychology experiments in history, the Stanford Prison Experiment, took place. Good morning, everyone. Hope you all are having an amazing day. As previously said, we will finally be covering the Stanford Prison Experiment, one of the most influential psychology experiments ever, and one that will definitely be tested on the AP exam. So for my AP Psych students, this experiment corresponds to topic 9.3 and is absolutely going to show up on the AP exam, so let's waste no time and get right into it. In the summer of 1971, Professor Philip Zimbardo led a research team at Stanford University to conduct a 2-week-long simulation of a prison environment in order to study how situational variables will affect the participants' behaviors. Participants were then gathered from the local community and selected based on their assessment of psychological stability. Then, through random sampling, which is the process of randomly assigning participants to a certain group, they were assigned either the role of a guard or a prisoner. Surprisingly enough, Professor Zimbardo himself took upon the role of the superintendent, with his undergraduate research assistant, David Jaffe, taking the role of the warden. Moving on to the guards, you can imagine that it's pretty tough to go from a regular civilian one day to all of a sudden becoming a prison guard, which is why Zimbardo's team held orientation sessions to teach the guards how to behave. First, the research team told the guards to not cause physical harm to the prisoners and forbid any withholding of food or drinks from the prisoners. The guards' main objective was to hold law and order. Additionally, the research team gave the guards each wooden batons to establish their status in the prison, as well as uniforms with sunglasses to not only create anonymity among the guards, but also to prohibit eye contact between the guards and the prisoners. More on the behaviors of the guards, they were instructed to disrespect the prisoners, as well as make them feel submissive and helpless.
Not in that way.
To do this, the guards would refer to prisoners by numbers rather than names to diminish their individuality. Now that we have the general background knowledge laid down, let me take you along the 6 days of the experiment that will shake the world.
P.S. The experiment was supposed to be for 2 weeks long, but due to the circumstances of which we will dive into in a moment, it was promptly shut down after day 6.
Day 1. Participants assigned with the role of the prisoners were, quote, arrested by the local Palo Alto police. Side note, the research team had not told the participants upfront that an arrest would be made, so all the participants were faced with a surprise. After this pleasant encounter, the participants were taken to the mock prison, where they would be strip searched and given a number as their new identity, along with a new uniform. The warden, played by the undergraduate research assistant, then informed the prisoners in a serious manner of the ramifications of their arrest, as well as their new status as prisoners. Finally, the prisoners retired to their cells, and that concludes day 1 of the experiment. Day 2. Keeping up with trying to de-individualize the prisoners, the guards persistently referred to them by numbers and confined them to their small cells. Then, a little past midnight, the prisoners seemingly had enough BS and decided to rebel against the guards' wake-up calls. The prisoners then proceeded to refuse to leave their cells, to eat in the yard, insult the guards, and several other mischievous acts. Now, you can imagine that the guards were in no way happy about this little act. In response to all of this, the guards sprayed fire extinguishers at the prisoners in order to re-establish control. On top of that, the guards removed all of the prisoners' clothes, removed their mattress, and even forced the main instigator to sit in solitary confinement. A key thing to note here is that one of the guards said to the others, and I quote,
"These are dangerous prisoners."
So at this point, you can tell that something horrendous is about to happen. But let's move on to day 3 nonetheless. Day 3. As an attempt to avoid further catastrophes, the guards separated and rewarded the prisoners who had minor roles in the rebellion, so those that simply followed the main instigators. Day 3 was also the day when the first prisoners dropped out. Douglas Corpy, or prisoner A612, was apparently exhibiting a mental breakdown, to which he yelled,
"Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside. I can't stand another night. I just can't take it anymore."
Based on this outburst, the research team released Corpy. Day 4. After seeing how the guards divided the prisoners depending on their good or bad behavior, the prisoners started to distance themselves from each other. This was because the protesters believed that the other prisoners would snitch. On the other hand, other prisoners saw the rebels as a threat, as they didn't want to be stripped of their beddings and clothings. It was also on this day when another prisoner, prisoner 819, started to show signs of distress. He was crying in his cell and having a breakdown. The research team eventually removed the prisoner, but when he was leaving, the guards made the remaining prisoners loudly repeat these following words.
819 did a bad thing. 819 did a bad thing. 819 did a bad thing. 819 did a bad thing.
Day 5. This is a day where the prisoners will be allowed visitations by families and friends. The setup is that Zimbardo, along with the guards, purposely made the guests wait for a long period of time. Then, only 2 visitors could see any one prisoner for just 10 minutes. Interestingly enough, on that same day, Zimbardo's colleague, Gordon Bauer, stopped by to ask Zimbardo what the independent variable of the research was. On top of that, another colleague, Christina Maslach, also visited the prison that night and was stressed at how the guards were abusing the prisoners. Because of this, Maslach challenged Zimbardo on his lack of caring for the prisoners, as well as the unethicalness of this study. The last blow was when Maslach told Zimbardo that he had been blinded and changed by his newfound role as a superintendent into someone she did not recognize. This comment resulted in Zimbardo ending the experiment the very next day. On day 6, Zimbardo gathered the participants to announce that the experiment was officially over and that they would pay the participants the full arranged fee regardless. Furthermore, Zimbardo also spent hours debriefing with the participants. So the results and the course that the experiment took was obviously shocking to everyone, and there have been many interpretations of the results of this experiment to support many different theories. First is the fact that situations cause behaviors rather than personality traits. In this case, it wasn't that the guards were inherently evil. Remember, all the participants were screened beforehand to have normal psychological stability. Instead, the guards acted the way that they did because they were placed in an environment that simulated a prison. This later affected their subsequent behaviors. Interesting to note is that this result seems similar to the Milgram experiment.
If you haven't heard our episode on the Milgram experiment yet, what are you doing? Just kidding, but you better listen to it after this episode.
As I was saying, in the Milgram experiment, the participants also weren't all devils spawned on Earth. Rather, it is said to be that the situation they were placed in ultimately caused them to administer lethal doses of electric shock to strangers. Still, these results are kind of hard to digest. Also, it is to be noted of the effect of an individual's role which is a social position that comes with a set of norms. Many argue that the role of the guards caused them to shift their behaviors and attitudes to fit their role as a prison guard, which sounds very similar to the case with cognitive dissonance. Side note, cognitive dissonance is the discomfort a person feels when their thoughts don't match with their action. But rather than shifting their behaviors to match their own thoughts or cognitions, the guards shifted their behaviors to match with their roles instead. So that's it for the actual experiment itself. For my AP Psych students, the main key points to remember is that the guards afterwards became very violent, and that the experiment is often cited as proof that behaviors can be changed through situations. Additionally, the experiment is also regarded as very unethical. All in all, the Stanford Prison Experiment is hands down one of the most controversial psychology experiments in the world. So thank you again for sticking around to the end of this episode, and I hope that you've learned something new today. Please look forward to our future episodes, and I hope you have an amazing day.